Anakin Solo's final stand during the mission to destroy the Voxan Queen in Star Wars is not only the death of a hero, but it was the ultimate expression of self-sacrifice and the profound cost of wielding unimaginable power as a Skywalker. Anakin Solo's death was not the result of a single wound, nor the consequence of a lack of skill or preparation. It was something far more complex, and honestly, haunting. Anakin did not die because he was defeated by his enemies. He died because he chose to burn brighter than anyone had before, channeling the Force in such a level of magnitude that his mortal body could no longer endure the strain. To understand the weight of the sacrifice, one must understand the nature of the Force and the paradox that it represents. The Force is boundless, infinite, all-encompassing, but those who wield it are not. Jedi are taught at the earliest age that control is everything. Power is not to be seized but guided, tempered with wisdom. It risks destroying and consuming the very vessel that channels it. But what Anakin faced in his final moments was not a challenge of control alone. This was something beyond this. Anakin's body had been weakened, burned, scarred, bloodied from the relentless onslaught of the Yuuzhan Vong. The mission had taken a toll not just on his body, but on Anakin's spirit. And yet, the stakes had never been higher. The Voxan, the relentless bioengineered beasts capable and designed to hunt down Jedi through their connection to the Force, had claimed the lives of too many Jedi too close to Anakin. If the Voxan Queen survived, it would mean endless clones, an unstoppable tide of death aimed squarely at the Jedi, his family, his friends, the very Order and galaxy itself. And so, as his body faltered, Anakin realized this truth. Control would not be enough. Restraint would not win this battle. Survival was impossible not for Anakin, not with his wounds, not with the swarm closing in, but victory. Maybe victory was still within reach. What he did next was not the measure of channeling the Force as a Jedi was trained to do. It was something far more dangerous and reckless, something far more difficult. Anakin Solo let go. He surrendered completely. He refused to hold back, not shielding himself at all. Anakin allowed the raw, untamed current of the Force to surge through him in its purest form. This was not easy. To channel the Force in such a magnitude was to embrace something that few beings can even comprehend. The energy was not calm. It was a storm, a wildfire burning hotter than any flame. The Force in its purest form was power beyond reason, infinite potential, but also infinite destruction. To accept that current was to risk obliteration, not just physically, but spiritually. It was not a decision that was made lightly, but Anakin chose it anyway. The first surge was unlike anything he had ever felt. It was simply power. It was a complete unraveling of himself though. His physical pain, the wounds, the exhaustion, all of it faded to irrelevance. The Force flooded every fiber of his being, a tidal wave of power that surged through his cells, strengthening him, lifting him beyond the limits of a broken body. But there was also pain too. The Force was not passive energy. It was alive, wild, burning through his muscles, but into his very essence as well. Anakin could feel it searing him from the inside, not in anger, not in malice, but as pure intensity, too vast for his mortal form to contain. And yet, Anakin kept pushing further. What made this act so profound wasn't just the power that he was channeling, it was the choice. Anakin was not driven by anger or revenge. This was a desperate act of defiance, but rather, it was greater. This was a conscious decision. He knew the risk. He could feel his body breaking, feel the fire coursing deeper with every breath. But still he held on, because to do anything less would mean failure. He could hear his siblings Jason and Jaina feel their presence flickering like candles in a storm. He knew that they could feel it too. His presence in the Force had become something impossible for anyone to ignore. Where once there had been a steady pulse of life, there was now an inferno of energy. A star burning so fiercely that it outshone everything around it. And the Yuuzhan Vong miraculously felt this too. The Vong could not touch the Force. They could not wield it. But even they could sense what was happening. The Vong were creatures of material, blind to the spiritual. But in Anakin's radiance, there was a power that they couldn't even deny. They faltered. They shrunk back, fearful of this new presence. They hid from the overwhelming truth that something far greater than them was rising before their eyes. But as Anakin pushed himself farther, as he tore deeper into the storm, the cost was undeniable. Channeling the Force in such a raw, unfiltered way wasn't just painful, it was purely destructive. Every heartbeat came with terrible weight, every surge of energy crackling through his body like lightning. His cells were beginning to break down. His mind was beginning to fray, struggling to hold together beneath the sheer intensity of the power that he had unleashed. Anakin Solo was literally beginning to burn away. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. His essence began to unravel. His physical form could not sustain what he had become. And yet, even at this moment, Anakin refused to relent. He couldn't. Not while the Voxan Queen was alive. Not while his friends and family were in danger. Not when the mission was incomplete. Anakin knew to his core, with perfect clarity, that this had been his purpose. He was not losing control. He was making a choice, a sacrifice. He accepted the pain that came with it, the unraveling, the burning away, because for Anakin, the mission, his family, the Jedi, mattered more than himself. His life was a small price to pay if it meant that his friends survived, if it meant the Jedi had a future. But what makes this sacrifice so tragic is that it wasn't inevitable. Anakin could have held back. He could have retreated. He could have chosen restraint, clung to life, instead of looking to destiny, instead of clinging to purpose. But that wasn't who Anakin Solo was. To Anakin, power was not something that he feared, but it was something to be wielded in the defense of others. The Force did not betray Anakin. It was simply too much, too vast, too limitless for any single being to contain, no matter how strong they were, no matter how pure they were. And as his body finally collapsed, as his physical form gave out, and his flame began to fade, there was no anger, there was no regret. The only thing left behind of Anakin was peace. For Anakin had given everything. His death was not a tragedy, it was a lesson, one that echoed far beyond any battlefield. Some, like his brother Jason, would see this as proof that the Jedi's philosophy was flawed, that restraint had failed Anakin, that the power should have been seized, not tempered. And yet, others like his sister Jaina would see the deeper truth, that true heroism isn't defined by survival, it is defined by one's sacrifice. Anakin Solo's death was not a failure, it was a great legacy. A reminder that true strength comes not from power that one wields, but from the courage to use it selflessly, even when it demands everything, especially when it demands everything. Anakin's death left a profound lasting impact on the galaxy, forever shaping the destinies of his siblings Jaina and Jacen Solo. For Jaina, Anakin's sacrifice was a defining lesson in courage and selflessness, a reminder that true strength is not measured by power, but willingness to give everything for others. Though his death shattered her emotionally, it also clarified her purpose as a Jedi, teaching her that the path of a Jedi was not about personal glory, but service, protection, and sacrifice. Anakin's final act inspired her to keep fighting against the darkness, to become the sword of the Jedi not out of vengeance, but out of a commitment to defend life. For Jacen, Anakin's death left a wound that would never heal. He saw his brother's death not as a noble act, but as a failure of the Jedi, a waste of potential brought on by restraint. To Jacen, Anakin had died because he held back, because the Jedi had failed to grasp the power that the Force could offer. This warped his perception of power and sacrifice, planting the seeds of his descent and transformation into Kaitis. Jacen lost himself. He believed that peace could only be achieved through domination, an elimination of weakness. An ironic betrayal of the very lesson that Anakin had died proving, that true strength lies not in control, but in the selfless use of power for the protection of others. Though his death was tragic, Anakin's sacrifice was one of the most peaceful and fulfilling ways that any Jedi could die. His end was not defined by violence or fear, but clarity and purpose. In his final moments, he captured the cost of his actions, not out of desperation, but as a conscious choice to give all that he had to save all that he loved. There was no struggle, no bitterness, only the radiant acceptance of his role as a Jedi, fully surrendering to the will of the Force, physically. Anakin Solo's death was not a failure, but a triumph, a reminder of what a great Jedi can do. But as always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting us in the archives today. Consider subscribing and enrolling to learn more about a galaxy far, far away, to learn more of the Jedi, the Sith, the Ancients, and the future. But as always, may the Force be with you.